Morning, everyone. I think I'm going to be stuck behind this lectern because I'm not mic'd up, so we'll see how we go with that. Thanks very much for joining the session. I really appreciate it. What I wanted to talk about today was, as I mentioned in the main session earlier on, the group that we've been working with, who actually have a total of 25 properties with 1,700 rooms that running on our system. But I was going to zone in specifically on the headline, if you like, which is the first 10 properties which they managed to onboard with 750 rooms in 1 week. Just to give you a quick summary of Apaleo for those of you who don't know us. We were founded back in January 2017. There's a bunch of us who come from a PMS world. Those of you who don't know me, I was with ProTel for 12 years, and prior to that I was with Guestline. So I'm acknowledging, I guess, right now that I was part of the problem that we're trying to solve for 19 of my 20 years in the industry. And we think that legacy PMS cause a bit of an issue with hotels. Painful integrations, vendor dependency, too much dependency on your PMS vendor to do what you need them to do at the right time, at the right cost, if any. The total cost of ownership of PMS is high. In addition to those initial upfront costs that are visible, the ongoing cost of maintaining that PMS, paying for new interfaces, training, all that kind of stuff. Long contracts that you're tied into that are very difficult to exit if the PMS vendor is not working for you. And frankly, quite appalling support in many cases as well. So long story short, we set about rectifying that, and we are what we like to term an API-first approach to PMS. I'll get into a little bit more detail about that as we go through the presentation. But to kind of summarize, and then I'll get into the case study itself, we have built a lean, intuitive cloud PMS, but we've built it on top of an API layer. And the fact that we're API first essentially means that everything we do in our PMS has to go into our API before we can even develop the feature in our PMS. And what that means in terms of capability is that nothing is unavailable to you as the hotelier in order to allow you to connect a third-party system, to customize anything like that. To capitalize on that, we then put on the other side of that an app store, much as you have an app store on your mobile phone, whether it's Google Play or Apple. And then all of the certified vendors that have connections to us are in that store. And really the purpose of all of that is to really provide an experience with business applications in hotels that you would already be familiar with on your smartphone. So, much more seamlessly connected systems. Very important point that the systems have to be intuitive to the extent that they should even be self-onboarding. And I will talk about that in some detail with this case study. We don't believe in integration fees, for example. So we think that those hidden fees should be eliminated. There's no justification for them anymore with modern systems. Of course, nowadays you expect your systems to be lightning fast, super flexible, and where possible to automate as many processes, both on the guest journey side, but also from a back office perspective as you can. So, introduction over. I was going to talk about specifically a company which has just rebranded as Nestor. Literally the PR went out yesterday on their rebrand. They are a UK management company. They have a mixed portfolio of accommodation. They have hotels, serviced apartments, student accommodation, currently operating in the UK, Ireland, and Spain. Just over 3,000 rooms under management. Not all of those on the Apaleo PMS right now. About 1,700, as I said, right now on the Apaleo PMS. And they, back in April, wanted to identify a PMS as the center or as the core piece in what we would call, if you like, a tech stack that they wanted to build out in order to be able to deliver the business in a very, very efficient way, more efficient than they had been achieving in the past. And they used a company called Catala Consulting to help them with that. I have had Thibaut up on stage with me before. He's not here today, unfortunately. This is going to be a very fast presentation, by the way. I think I'll be done literally in about 15, 20 minutes. So you'll either be free to go and grab another coffee or ask me any questions if you want to. So the timeline for this particular project, so this is a UK company. They were headquartered in London. Contacted us back in April 2019. It was a Wednesday morning at 9:30 when the first inbound email from that company arrived. And by Friday morning at 9:30, they had confirmed that they were going to go ahead and proceed with Apaleo. They had looked at other PMSs. Typically, they were looking at the more modern cloud-based PMSs as opposed to some of the more traditional, well-established PMSs out there. So they made that decision in 2 days, from start to finish. They went live with their pilot site. They gave us the challenge of getting them live in their pilot site 1 week later, the following Friday. We were ready 1 week later, they weren't, so it ended up taking 2 weeks. And they ran with the system in that one 16-bedroom hotel in Knightsbridge in London for 1 month. Before then, without even telling us about it, they decided to go ahead and to implement our rollout to another 10 properties with 750 rooms. And it just so happened that I had a meeting with them on the Monday morning, and they casually told me that over the weekend that they had started to configure these additional properties in our PMS. So this is kind of like the crux of the case study that I was going to talk about today, was that sort of process of getting from 0 essentially to 10 properties, 750 rooms in 1 week between the 22nd and the 29th of May this year. Back in June 2019, they went live with phase 2 and added by themselves, without any help from Apaleo, a further 15 properties and 870 rooms in that particular case, which took them up to just over 1,600 rooms on our platform at that time. The phase 1 rollout at the end of May took them live not just with the PMS, but also connected to distribution. They used a channel manager called Cubulus. And also payment. We have an integrated payment component as part of our offering, and they went live with that at the same time as well. Subsequently, they have, over the past 5 or 6 months, they've added a revenue management system. Shout out to Pace, if any of you know them. They selected Pace as their revenue management system. Pace then did the integration with us in about 2 weeks, something like that, from start to finish in terms of the actual coding, testing, certifying with our team, getting it live. So they were in pilot about 2 weeks after they started actually developing the integration. That got signed off very, very quickly as well. They've added an internet booking engine, which is fully integrated into the PMS with full integration to the same payment system. And they've also done quite a few custom integrations along the way as well. They had quite big ambitions for custom integrations. They haven't yet got to the point where I would say they're not necessarily doing those custom integrations at pace right now, but they have done some customizations, again, without any input from us really, over the past 5 or 6 months. And I guess the question then is, how did they manage to achieve this, and how did the Apaleo PMS help them to do that? Because when I talk to people about this, it's quite interesting because normally I'm met with skepticism when I talk about this story. I've been telling people about this in individual meetings since June, and I get quite a few raised eyebrows. It's not technically or physically possible to onboard 10 hotels with 750 rooms connected to distribution and payment in 1 week, especially if you don't have any on-site support from your PMS supplier, which they chose not to have. But that's actually what happened. And really, the key factors that perhaps allowed that to happen in their case were a few. They take us back to some of those core philosophies that we have with the PMS. So as one example, we very, very heavily promote the philosophy of self-onboarding with our PMS. It's a bit of a contentious point depending on who you are and where you sit in the debate, but suffice it to say that it's absolutely possible to onboard our PMS yourself if that's what you want to do. About 80% of the customers who are live with us right now have done so without having anybody from Apaleo visit their property or visit their HQ. It's all been done on a self-onboarding basis, albeit with some remote guided sessions from us via the web, that kind of stuff. And I've just brought up here an example of how we promote that self-onboarding philosophy. In addition to trying to make it lean and intuitive, we've also added some features. You'll see here that we have, this is a partial screenshot from the Apaleo system. In this particular case, Hotel Berlin has been configured as the template property. And then we have the option to clone that template property, which then automatically clones across all of those settings that you see on screen to a new property. So actually, in the case of Nestor, that wasn't available back in May 2019. So they had to manually configure each property. So they had to create all of the property information that you would expect, the invoice settings, the automation settings, payment settings, room types, rate plans, policies, all of that stuff they were doing manually on a property by property basis. But typically it was taking them about 2 hours per property to configure the PMS. But since then, we've added this feature with the clone capability, which reduces that time from 2 hour setup to probably about 10 minutes, because all you have to do once you've done the clone is add your specific property data, so address details, stuff like that, and then your rooms, which can be added in batch by room type. So it takes about 2 or 3 minutes per room type to add all of your rooms, and then you're pretty much ready to go on that basis. The other thing that we focused on very, very much in building this PMS was ease of use. Nice, clean, intuitive user interface. And the reason that we've done that again is to really heavily promote the self-onboarding piece. We're trying to convince people that it's possible to implement a PMS without necessarily having to pay thousands and thousands of pounds to your PMS vendor, for them to send their highly qualified trainers to site and to run through that with you. Now, of course, there are some people out there who still want that to happen, and that's fine. We can provide that if needed, but I would really, really stress that 80% of the customers that we've had on board so far have done it by themselves without anybody on site from us. Also, from a housekeeping perspective, for example, nice mobile responsive interface. Very, very easy, no app to download, no real training to be done with the staff. And in the case of Nestor, to take it back to Nestor, Thibaut Catala from Catala Consulting, he took on the APA hero, as we like to call them, role. He informed himself of all of the capabilities of the PMS, and then he essentially trained the staff in those 10 different properties remotely. He did not visit those properties. He trained those staff over the course of that 7-day period, whilst also configuring the system, connecting it to a channel manager, getting the payment system in place. He trained all of the staff that needed to be able to use the system remotely, from housekeeping all the way down to reception and the reservations team as well. We've also put a fairly heavy focus, if you like, on automation. There's a lot of processes in hotels at the moment that are quite unwieldy. 2 in particular would be payment. Some of the more modern systems, and Apaleo specifically, will allow you to automate the collection of payments, regardless of the scenario, really. So whether it's a prepaid rate and you're collecting the payment at the point of reservation, whether it's pay on arrival, pay on departure, whether you want to collect cancellation fees or no-show fees, all of that can now be automated with the relevant integration to a payment system, of course fully PCI compliant, but it essentially means that you take away the onus of having a human being having to manually process those payments. In addition to that, for example, with the Booking.com integration that we have done the direct integration with them to allow further capability, which includes, for example, the automatic triggering of messages from our platform back to Booking.com and onward to the guest if the credit card that has been provided is invalid, for example, and rejected by our payment system. So that takes that whole onus of having to manually contact the customer to tell them there's a problem with their card. We've also automated other processes, not for everybody, but it is possible, for example, to automate check-in, check-out, and Nestor do that in some of their properties. So as far as they're concerned, all of their rates are prepaid. If you haven't cancelled, by the time the cancellation policy kicks in, they have that money. It belongs to them, and they will automatically check the guests in at a certain time, at the default time that they've configured, and automatically check them back out again. So it just, again, saves that entire process. Some of their properties are not heavily manned, so they've done that to increase capability there. As somebody who comes from a traditional PMS background, I'm not going to lie, I found that a little bit hard to get my head around at first, but we have real live customers who are doing it. Perhaps more appropriately, night audit. From my traditional background, I know that night audit can be a bit of a pain point, has to be run manually. Somebody has to press a button when the last bar or restaurant in the hotel has closed at 2 o'clock in the morning. It should really these days be possible to automate that process entirely and just have it run in the background. And also then deal with your no-shows accordingly, all of that kind of stuff. The other big selling piece, if you like, for Nestor was integrations. And integrations, as we know it in today's traditional hotel systems marketplace, can be quite a frustrating point. I know that a typical number for a PMS support desk in terms of the percentage of calls that are coming through relating to interfaces sits at about 30 to 35%. If you think about the experience that you have on your smartphone with downloading an app, opening it up, having the system ask you if it's whether you want to create an account or log in with Facebook, for example. You say log in with Facebook. It says, hey, can we have permission to grab Facebook's your profile picture, your email address, your friend list from Facebook? You say, yes, you can. It says, thanks very much. We're building the app for you now. And then within a couple of seconds, the app is ready, available to use. And if, for example, it's a dining recommendation app, it'll straight away pop up and say, hey, did you know that your friend Alan, your Facebook friend Alan, was in this restaurant just 100 meters from you and gave it a 4 out of 5 star rating? So that experience that we have on our mobile phones is really, it's become just a norm for us, right? So we expect that in terms of our consumer experience with technology. And our argument is that that's absolutely possible with business applications today as well. This is one particular company that I just use as an example. Abitari is a housekeeping and maintenance solution. It also does check-in kiosks, a few other bits and pieces. They have a nice integration with us. And if you are an Apaleo customer who then wants to try out the Abitari system, having seen them on our app store, decided to go for a free trial, you can even, as a hotelier, without having to contact either party, you can even say, okay, I'm going to try that system, and I'm going to connect it to my Apaleo system so I have real data. So when you log into their system, it asks you to log in with your Apaleo username and password. It then asks you if you are in a multi-property environment, which hotel you want to connect. It then pops up the authentication screen, and once you grant it access, it starts to build itself. And within about 25, 30 seconds in this particular case, that housekeeping and maintenance solution is then ready to use. It has all of your room information, it has all of your housekeeping status, and it's ready to go ahead and use. The only thing you might need to use is to configure some users in that system as well. And in our store, about 60% of the third parties that are connected to us at the moment are using that one-click connect capability, as we like to call it. For those of you who are technical, it's using OAuth 2.0. I have no idea what that means, but apparently it's impressive if you're a tech person. So that's really, another thing that was really, really key for Nestor. Number one, the speed with which third parties that they selected could integrate to us, Pace being a case in point, having done the integration in about 2 weeks, which for revenue management is quite impressive. Is there anybody from Pace in the room before I say this? Okay, so there was another revenue management system who actually integrated to us in 3 days. They did that last November, just before World Travel Market, last-minute decision that they wanted to be able to showcase that integration. The other nice thing about the integration piece is being able to embed third-party systems or screens from third-party systems or data from third-party systems into the PMS workflow. So on screen here you can see our PMS, but that actual statistical KPI screen is not from the Apaleo PMS, that's from a connected hotel statistics tool, in this particular case called My Hotel Stats, who have done an integration with us, and we allow them to embed screens into various parts of the PMS. This one is embedded into the reporting menu, but also, for example, on the reservations, the PMS reservation, they can add tabs to our workflow, so that if you're a CRM, for example, that is connected to Apaleo, the user is in the reservation for Alan O'Riordan and they have a CRM tab, and they can click on that tab, see all of the live CRM data for that particular guest, interact with it, update it, make decisions based on that information. And then the other thing that was really important to Nestor was the ability to take control of their own destiny. I mentioned at the outset that they really had this ambition to do custom developments against our APIs. And all of this kind of hinges around these open APIs. So it's possible for them to use our APIs to develop some sort of custom capability over the top of the PMS. If they develop their own tool to do something, they can connect it to our PMS. They can also write to our APIs to extract data as needed from the system. To give you one particular example, again, without telling us, we just found this out in an account review meeting. They wrote a customization against our API to pull availability in real time so that they could pass that across to some third-party OTAs that weren't connected through their channel manager. And they just casually told us about this when we went to see them about a month ago. And the reason that they can do that is because that API connectivity is completely public, completely open. It's on our website. If you were to go to api.apaleo.com, you would see this page, or this is part of the page on screen here, where we provide people with the capability to sign up for their own test account. So they don't have to talk to us about this. They can create their own test account. We can pre-populate it with data for them. They can review our integration guides for all of the most common integrations that we find ourselves dealing with. They can go ahead and request API credentials. And then they also have full access to the actual APIs themselves. The Apaleo core API on the left-hand side is where all the logic of the PMS sits. But then we have some nice additional APIs. For example, all of our configuration can be done through an API. So if you're a hotel group, for example, that has a master source of data for all of your property information, your room types, your rooms, and that's already sitting somewhere, no need to reconfigure that in the PMS. That can be sucked through the API and configure the PMS automatically. So this was very, very attractive to, excuse me, to Nestor. And for those of you who are really interested in the tech stuff, that's what an API page looks like. And you know, one of the things that I like about this is the fact that we can also, and we did this for Nestor, we can migrate data from legacy PMSs. So that era of having to manually rekey your reservations into the new PMS is no more. And you'll see there I've just highlighted a command, if you like, in our API, which allows people to post bookings into our system. So if you have bookings sitting in the third-party system, you can use our API to post those bookings directly into the PMS. And this was huge for Nestor as well, because they did have a legacy system. They needed to migrate several thousand, I believe, reservations across. They couldn't have done that in 7 working days, 7 calendar days, 5 working days, without the benefit of the data migration capabilities through our API. I'm going a little bit longer than I thought I was going to, but we're nearly done. And actually, this is the final slide. So I hope that all makes sense. It's a very, very quick summary of the concept behind Apaleo, the project that we went through with Nestor, how they managed to get to the point where they could install so quickly. They didn't pay us a penny up front, by the way, just to really reiterate that. There was no CapEx involved in this particular project. They contracted with us on a per room, per month basis, 12-month contract. They paid nothing up front. We provided them with remote web sessions to help them with the initial stages of configuration training. Then they took over from there, did it all themselves. And as they add new integrations, I was about to say we don't care. We do care. We want to know what they're integrating against us, and we do have to take a look at performance and make sure that they've done good integrations. But from a commercial point of view, we actually really don't care. We don't charge a penny more for that. They could have 25 integrations to our PMS, or they could have 0 integrations. It makes absolutely no difference how much they pay us for this PMS. So in summary, where we are today, we've got 250 contracted properties in 7 countries. In Europe, 6 countries in Europe, 1 in Indonesia. We'll be piloting with a group in the US in February. 30 people at the moment. And our average, by the way, just for those of you who are interested, is 1 support call per property per month that we're receiving to our help desk. And we've got around about the 100 mark now, actually, certified integrations that are available via our App Store. I've talked for half an hour, or 25 minutes, because I started 5 minutes late. That's me done. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. David.
Talking about the automatic update information back to booking.com or other channels that have the API.
Yeah.
What about things like GDPR and the right to be forgotten? So if I get a data request, I want to be able to effectively send that right to be forgotten to all the integrated partners.
Yeah.
As opposed to, is that supported?
That is supported. One of the concepts of Apaleo really is that we don't consider ourselves to be We're not trying to be a CRM solution. So we think in the new world order of tech, hotel ecosystem, if you like, that the PMS should not really be very influential in terms of the overall profile. So we actually hold in Apaleo a relatively small amount of information on the profile, just the amount that's needed to fulfill the reservation. And the example that I mentioned earlier of a CRM being able to embed deeply into the workflows and being able to do a real-time sync of data, regardless of which side a profile is updated, that becomes very, very prominent in that particular scenario, if you like. From a GDPR perspective, we're capable of receiving commands through the API to delete any profile data that we have.
Is that delete as well as anonymous?
I'd have to check. I think it might just be delete at the moment, but I'd have to check to be sure. Any other questions? If there aren't any other questions, you guys are going to have an early coffee break or an interim coffee break before the next session. Thanks very much for your time. Take care.